High on a hill overlooking Washington, D.C., a grand mansion with towering Greek columns watches over a silent sea of white headstones. This is Arlington. We know it as a national shrine, the final resting place for American heroes. And that mansion? That's Arlington House, best known as the home of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. But that's not the whole story. It's not even the most important one. What if I told you the home of America's most famous Confederate general also became a place where formerly enslaved people built new lives of their own? This is the story of Arlington most people never hear. A story of contradiction, of transformation, and of a community that history almost let disappear. Long before Robert E. Lee lived here, Arlington House was built by George Washington Parke Custis, the step-grandson of George Washington. Construction began in 1802 and continued for years, not as a home for Washington, but as a living memorial to him. Custis filled it with relics, stories, and symbolism meant to honor the nation's first president. But like so many monuments to liberty, this one was built on bondage. The estate was powered by enslaved labor. Men, women, and children, many inherited through the Custis family, built the mansion, worked the fields, and lived in quarters just beyond its shadow. Families like the Sifaxes, the Grays, and the Burkes created lives here, even as those lives were not their own. In 1831, Custis's daughter, Mary Anna Custis, married a young Army officer, Robert E. Lee. When Custis died in 1857, the estate passed to her. Lee took control of the plantation and the people enslaved there. Custis's will required that they be freed within 5 years. Lee waited nearly the full term. Accounts from the time suggest strict enforcement of labor during those years, though historians still debate the full picture of his role. By the spring of 1861, Arlington stood as a place of privilege built on injustice. And then, the country broke. When Virginia seceded, Lee made his choice. He resigned from the U.S. Army, and within weeks, Union forces crossed the Potomac and seized this hill. The Lee family fled. They would never live here again. As war consumed the nation, Washington, D.C. filled with people seeking freedom. Formerly enslaved men, women, and children, many fleeing Confederate territory, arrived with nothing but hope. They were labeled contraband of war, and they had nowhere to go. So in 1863, the federal government made a decision heavy with symbolism. They built a new community on the land of Robert E. Lee. Freedman's Village was established on the Arlington estate. It wasn't just a refugee camp. It was an experiment. Rows of small homes were constructed, simple, but owned and maintained by the people who lived in them. Schools were opened, churches were built, trades were taught. Families earned wages, grew crops, and built something many had never been allowed before, a life of their own. At its height, more than 1,500 people lived here. Even Sojourner Truth spent time in the village advocating and supporting the community. For the first time on this land, freedom wasn't an idea. It was something you could wake up and walk through. Freedman's Village was meant to be temporary, but life doesn't uproot so easily. Families built homes, communities formed, roots went deep. For more than 30 years, the village stood, but pressure grew. Arlington National Cemetery expanded, Fort Myer expanded, and the land became too valuable to leave untouched. Then came the legal turning point. In 1882, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of George Washington Custis Lee, declaring the original seizure of the property illegal. The government resolved the case by purchasing the land outright, but that decision sealed the fate of the village. Residents fought to stay. Leaders like John Cephas petitioned for fairness, for recognition of what had been built there. They were granted compensation, but not permanence. By 1900, the last families were forced to leave. The homes were dismantled, the streets disappeared, and the village was erased, physically, if not completely, from memory. For decades, Freedman's village faded into the background of Arlington's story, overshadowed by generals, monuments, and marble rows of the fallen. But its legacy didn't vanish. The people who lived here carried it forward. They founded new communities nearby, places like Green Valley, built on the same spirit of independence and resilience. Today, their descendants continue the work of remembering, because history doesn't live in monuments. Sometimes, it lives in what was removed. Arlington is more than a cemetery, and it's more than Robert E. Lee's former home. It's a place where the full story of America sits side by side, a mansion built to honor liberty, raised by enslaved hands, a general who chose division, and a nation that fought to reunite, and for a brief, powerful moment, a village where freedom took root for the first time. Freedman's village may be gone from the landscape, but its story still lingers here, quiet, unmarked, waiting for someone to tell it.